Mark Walsh here from Embodied Yoga Principles. This is a video on yoga trends. Now, the very idea of yoga trends may repulse you. It partly does me. It's a long, ancient, in many ways, universal practice of awareness. You might think trends, fashion, However, we live in the modern world and there are trends. I think it's worth mentioning some of them, some positive, some less. So one trend we've seen over the years is towards a more extreme kind of yoga. So first was the Ashtanga, then the Vinyasa, the power, the hot yoga. I'm waiting for kind of torture yoga or like hell yoga, I feel like I could make a load of money if I wanted to by just making an extreme form of sort of militaristic, aggressive yoga, this is where I'm just making it as painful and as extreme as possible. And this is very interesting where this is coming from, though, I think, as a trend. We see it get more extreme every year. And by far the most popular kinds of yoga in most urban environments, these hot yogas or strong vinyasa yogas, is that people feel like they're getting benefit if they suffer, right? Like I was in a hot yoga class and it was red lit, hot, no air. My muscles are screaming. I'm like, I'm in hell. I watched a documentary on Dante's Inferno the day before, and it's it was certainly painful, but part of me is going, but it's good. It's good that I suffer because then I will grow spiritually. This is a very old and very quite Christian idea that's inherent in yoga. So that's, I think, one reason behind it. I'm not actually against these practices. I feel like they do have a place if it's what you need, right? So the problem is, most of the time it's people in cities who are extremely fast and hyper-aroused anyway, and they're doing this just deepens that neurosis of doing an activity rather than the sort of beautiful not doing, the allowing of yoga. So I think, it's well worth looking at, is this something you really need rather than just deepening this urban, intense, fast kind of practice. So this is one trend that we're seeing in yoga that I think will continue, and I think it will continue to get more extreme, at least for a while. The other thing that we're seeing is the counterpoint to that. So we're seeing the kind of slow yoga. A friend of mine from New York does, shout out to Jay Brown, classes on slow yoga, as Jane from Eastbourne, a student and friend of mine, does this as well. So this counterpoint of the yin I think will continue to grow. And also like a more considered approach. And I've seen some resurgence of almost sort of Iyengar-y, kind of very slow, considered approach. And I think, because there's been this trend of the sort of 200-hour teacher training, people have, just flooded the market with yoga teachers. And I think that will continue just because the economics there's like a pyramid scheme, It's like every ice cream van is making ice cream vans. There's a pyramid scheme where people can only afford to stay as yoga teachers, the economics of it, if they do 200-hour teacher training. So sadly, I feel like that trend will continue for a while, that people will keep churning out teachers. And the other one is yoga holidays, right, the exotic. But I feel like there's also going to be a swing back, and I've seen this, like Jim Taran is a teacher of mine. He does this sort of Iyengar-based, very traditional kind of practice, and he's really got depth as a teacher, or Gary Carter or Pete Blackaby, these are teachers I respect, and people are now drawn to them. So you see this differentiation of the kind of 200-hour from the kind of people who've really got experience, and you'll see that differentiation. And I feel like as the market matures, people will learn that differentiation. In the same way as, for example, when wine was first sold in China, it was just flogging any old bottle of wine. And then after a while, now the Chinese market's more mature with wine, people know what's a good Beaujolais or a good Chilean wine or whatever, because people learn to differentiate. So that differentiation of quality, which is a really good thing, is, I think, going to increase as the market matures. Also, as the market becomes flooded, and this is just a market economics thing, what happens is increased differentiation. So at the moment, it used to just be yoga in my mum's day when she was teaching yoga. Now it might be like hot yoga or yin yoga or pregnancy yoga, and it's going to get more and more specialist. So you're going to, and this is a business driving thing again, you're going to see, pregnancy yoga for, I don't know, black women who like to dance. Yeah, it's going to be like even more and more specialist. It's going to be, not just Ashtanga, it's going to be a particular kind of Ashtanga for a particular person. So increased differentiation you're going to see in the market as well. We're also starting to see the sort of psychological maturity of yoga. I think a lot of people feel like ripped off by yoga. They were told it was spiritual and it ended up just being bad gymnastics. So I think there's going to be a return to some of the traditional forms of, really looking at, like Jim Taran, my teacher, Sanskrit, and really looking at it. There's also going to be a Western emergence where yoga starts to be blended with other wisdom traditions, particularly psychotherapy. You'll see this in Buddhism too. So blended with psychotherapy, things like dance, things like martial arts, improv, like the embodied yoga principles that I do is very much part of that trend. I don't think I'm the only one. Mariana Kaplan, for example, is doing some great stuff combining yoga with therapy, psychological work, because there's real Western traditions that have a lot to say about the body. And we're also going to see more free yoga. So ultimately, at the moment, yoga is mostly coming from the guru tradition and one size fits all, which kind of Iyengar, this kind of lineage, Ashtanga. And we're going to see an increase of actually feeling how do you want to move rather than you have to do it in the prescribed way. That just fits with Western liberal values, so that's going to come out. Really what we're going to see is the emergence of a Western yoga that's non-guru based, potentially even democratic. Oh, imagine that. Okay, we're starting to incorporate some of the trauma understandings. I think it's massive. So it's not just trauma sensitive yoga, it's trauma informed across the yoga field. Getting rid of this sort of guru model, which has just been shown to be abusive time and time again. And there's just too many scandals. It's one after the other. And I think people are going to get wise to that. And ultimately, the structure of how yoga is taught is going to change. This idea of teacher knows best. I mean, often I hear, listen to your body, follow your body, as lip service, but I think that's really going to start being followed in the same way as like 5 rhythms. You're listening to yourself as you're dancing or improv. That is very much aligned with kind of Western traditions, so that's a positive thing the West can bring in. Trauma awareness and a bit more democratic and a bit more individualized, a bit less guru one size fits all, which is some of the less positive Asian tradition, dare I say it, before I get a whole load of angry Indian yoga teachers after me. There are some positive Western influences that are going to come in, which is going to be really, really cool. And I'm starting to see that now. And I feel good about that. I feel good about that influence. And then, the other side, the less positive Western side, the commercialization of yoga is going to continue. In many places, it's just become fitness. I'm in Russia right now. Most yoga here is fitness. It's not yoga. It's not awareness-based. It's not breath-based. It's not transformative. It's fitness. And I feel like there's going to be a bit of a war between the sort of fitness yoga, this war for the soul of yoga I really see continuing. And what has been difficult is a sort of postmodern view has said, well, who gets to say what yoga is and isn't? Who gets to define it? And anything is yoga. I don't think that's going to hold up. I think there's actually going to be some, we see this coming from India already, but I feel like in the West, people are going to start making some stands on this. A teacher I love called Jude, who's Scottish, she says, if it's not fucking breath, there's no fucking yoga. Scottish yoga teacher's really making a stand. She's saying, look, if there isn't breath, there isn't yoga. And that's what I think is going to happen. I feel like people are going to start making stands. I say if it's not awareness-based, it's not yoga. So it's a small distinction. And so who are you to define yoga? It's like, no, if it's not awareness-based, it's not yoga. Yeah. So I feel like there is going to be some stands around that. And it's interesting, this tension between the innovative, like I've produced something innovative in EYP, and not squashing innovation, but simultaneously not saying doga and voga and everything. You can Google any word with yoga now. It's like, just put a word into the internet, ketchup yoga, whatever, beer yoga we have now, right? So I think that's going to get so ridiculous that there'll be a lot of people actually saying, look, come on, yes, let's be innovative. And I hope that continues, it doesn't regress, but let actually make some distinctions. I think, I do see that happening. The trauma-sensitive thing I mentioned, which is generally a good thing, but that I think is also going to go too far as the sort of social justice kind of Canadian America sort of leading yoga right now, and in some really positive ways. People like Carol Horton, Matthew Remski, some really good thinkers out there. However, I think it might go a bit far towards a sort of social justice yoga. And on the positive, I see yoga becoming more socially engaged. So for example, Carol's talked a lot about the, I won't specify Carol, lots of people, the Yoga Service Council, for example, right? Or yoga off the mat, beautiful movement, not always my cup of tea in the flavor, but really good-hearted people, Sean Korn and people like that. Trying to get yoga out there into the world, I think that will continue, and using yoga positively, seeing there's a political implication to yoga. I was in a class in Kiev last week, and it was like, it was clear people were practicing conformity. They were practicing not having agency over their own body. And that made me sad. I just thought, is this what these young ladies, nearly all, needed to practice, in the class? Probably not. Yeah. So I think awareness of some of the political stuff is good, and it might go a bit far. I think what we might see is sort of everyone becoming terribly sensitive You know, someone got very upset there was mirrors in one of my workshops over there. It's like, okay, well, it's not ideal, but you know, you're traumatized by your own reflection, really. Could all get a bit sensitive, and there can be this constraining quality to the authoritarian left, which is quite popular in the yoga world now. You've got this weird war going on between sort of traditionalists who can be quite conservative, and they have, you know, certain disadvantages, obviously, and this kind of new authoritarian left, which you see coming out of American college campuses, which is now infecting, I use the word infecting, yoga culture, and it can make it a little bit too sensitive and quite unpleasant, actually, quite unpleasant. So I think we're going to see those yoga wars continue. I no doubt will get criticism for saying this, but that's part of what I'm talking about. Thank you for proving my point. So we will see that continue. So that's another trend that I see. What else? What else? Urban yoga, hell yoga, kickback. Yeah, I think they're the main ones. I travel around a lot, and it is different in different countries. Like, for example, Sweden, where I teach, it's quite developed in the narrative, you know. Russia's a bit different, you know, they've got a slightly different thing going on, this culture. I think the increasing differentiation across cultures may also happen as well as it becomes different things in different countries. Some of the gender-based stuff, I see some really interesting stuff happening with like women's yoga and womb yoga, and friends of mine do that in the UK, and I think that's going to be interesting as kind of women, some power, you know, here's the tension here. Yoga is dominated by women, right? So the vast majority of people that do yoga, and increasingly, though this was different, more teachers are women. I think it's going to be quite interesting. I think some real positive things to that. You know, I was in my friend Julia's class, and I was learning all about cycles and menstruation, how that affects yoga. It was a really good education, you know. And this, sorry, I'm losing the name of the person who wrote a really good book on this subject, but there's good stuff out there. And I think could be interesting for guys, though, as well, as it gets increasingly sort of female-dominated, and, you know, where are the guys going to go there? I think there could be an interesting sort of gender thing happening in yoga as well. A few predictions. What the hell do I know? Who knows the future? I've got a biased point of view. What's your view? Tell me in the comments, discuss it on Facebook, whatever. It'd be good to see what you think of these rambling predictions. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, you can subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. More importantly, however, get the newsletter. So the newsletter you do, is that right? In the box here? Okay. So why you would want the newsletter? So you hear about the best videos, so you actually ask me questions, you can reply to the newsletter, I'll reply. You can hear about events, teacher trainings, other things that are happening, and stay in touch more reliably. So newsletter there.